Good. You're recording now. It shows us you are.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Hello, everyone. It's Tatiana from Noteworthy Resources of Albany. It's a local nonprofit in the Capital Region. And what we're doing is we're hosting community panel discussions to talk more about topics that no one really wants to talk about, in depth, and to really get some answers and to come together and express ourselves and ask questions and answer them in an empowering, safe way. So you are all here right now listening and being a part of this community panel discussion because you really believe in love and hope in one another. And I'm so excited to introduce, and today we're talking about racism and allyship and how to be an ally to our Black community. They need us the most. They've always needed us. And now we're gonna just become stronger and keep going forward with this battle to end racism now. So I would love to introduce the panel. If you want to learn more about the panel, please go to nwralbany.org and you can read more about our panelists. And I'm just going to introduce our first panelist, Tanisha.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi. So I'm okay. How are you? I'm really excited to speak with you and all these wonderful people. And I want to thank everybody for really promoting this as much as they did. I had so many people inboxing me and so many people talking to me about this, and it just shows that people actually do care and they're interested, and there's change to be had. So I'm really excited. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry. So, and you have mentioned in your bio that you are first generation American from Jamaica. Mm-hmm. And yes. You're also first generation American queer Black woman. And yes. How do you see yourself in the community? Like what type of?
So I play a couple roles in the community. I guess first and foremost, I am a Black queer woman. Second of all, I'm a burlesque performer. I am a community theater performer and activist, and I'm a nurse. So that's just like me all encompassing. So I take care of people on a broad scale, but I also, I guess, take care of people on an entertainment scale. But I'm really trying to carve out a place for people of color and marginalized people in those spaces. I've experienced, racism at work with coworkers. I've experienced, I guess, miscasting or almost typecasting to really stereotypical Black things like, oh, you're from the hood. And I just kind of want to eradicate those types of, stereotyping, just kind of putting people in boxes that I guess other people wouldn't necessarily be put in. When it comes to Black people, it's always like, you have to be the happy Negro in the musical. And there's so much literature, there's so much art out there that are from people of color, marginalized people, non-binary people, queer people. So much literature, so much deep-rooted, beautiful, and sometimes jarring literature that can be exposed on a broader scale. And I kind of just want to make sure that I pave a way for that. So my friends and I started a committee. It's called the Committee for Diversity and Representation. And what we do is we try to bring education and programming to people who are not so fortunate, for people who are marginalized in ways that can hinder them from actually being involved in their community. The number one thing that we're wanting to do is to make sure that there is education when it comes to dealing with the very fine intricacies of people's sexualities, of people's cultural background, of things that may not be so closely looked at when it comes to character development for minorities. And we just want to make sure that we can reach out to as many kids, adults, as we can to make sure that there is representation for marginalized people, as well as people of color, as well as women, as well as trans people, so they don't feel left out or put into a box and kept there and have no expression of how they should feel. So if anybody wants to get involved, it's diversity at sloc.org. Just shoot us an email and we'll hit you right back with any information of the programs that we are doing. We have so much planned for the entire year, basically, that we want all hands on deck, and we do need volunteers, and we do need people who are interested in theater as well as advocating for things like Black Lives Matter. We make sure to go to lots and lots of protests, and we go to prides. We want to just talk to everyone because we want everyone to be represented. So that's what I do.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing for the community, for everyone. Like, you are a huge role model. Huge
Thank you.
Community and beyond. It's sky's the limit. Thank you. Our next panelist is Jammella. Jammella, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So introduce yourself. Tell the audience, who's Jammella?
I don't know who that is. I don't know what I am anymore. So I'm Jammella. I'm from here. I grew up in Clifton Park, which just like from the jump was really hard as a kid, especially being biracial. And my mom was adopted, so I grew up with like a mostly white family. So I've had a lot of identity issues pretty much my whole life, which was kind of like informed the work that I do now. But it took like kind of growing up in such a white place to be able to like understand kind of like who I've become as a person. And there was like a lot of unlearning, a lot of undoing. But right around maybe 21, I found yoga. And yoga for me kind of felt like church. And it was something that like I'd gone to church a lot, and I'd been through sort of like community things like that. Nothing ever really sat with me. So I did a couple months of just yoga practice, and then I decided I want to be a yoga teacher because it really spoke to me. And so I started teaching a few months after I graduated, and I think I was at that point 23. And then I was teaching for a couple of years, and I never really noticed that I was a Black yoga teacher until someone was like, "You're a Black yoga teacher." And it was sort of like that, what? I'm like, wait a second. And it was like this, like, sort of like my vision got a little clearer, and I was like, oh, that's how you see me. And that was really tough because I looked around and I was like, oh, there really isn't nobody here like me. And I find that is what has been my whole life. Like, I'm like, oh, there's nobody else here. Like, there's no teachers like me. There's no students like me. The students that are Black that I am around in my school, which was maybe 10, like, are nothing like me. And I'm like, kind of like the weird, not even like dorky, but I just like, I can fit in with everybody, but also nobody at the same time. And so it was like this another point in my life where I was like, holy shit, I'm different. And so I kind of felt, now I like started to understand what like being marginalized was in this way. So it's like, I feel this as like, I'm a Black person in my school in Clifton Park, I'm marginalized, but now I'm like, oh, I'm in this thing that like for me was taught that was for brown people, but then is predominantly white. And there are barely any even like Indian teachers in the area. So it's kind of alarming. So I think at that point is when I started to do some like real internal work, and the sort of like social justice part of me started to come out. But because again, nobody looked like me, it was like falling on deaf ears when I bring anything up. People were like, oh yeah. And then, okay, we'll put you here. Oh, you can do this thing. Oh yeah. Like, I've been offered community classes a lot because I'm like, oh, there's no Black people in my classes. And then they say, oh, do a community class. I'm like, does that mean that you think Black people are poor because you're doing a community class? Like, and so for me, I was like, oh, like, people don't understand how internalized the racism is. And even for me, it was like, I was like, oh, thank you. You gave me a thing, but it seems like, oh, we're going to give her the treat and she'll sit in the corner and shut up for a little bit. And I find that every day in anything I do. A lot of people don't understand that when they say things like that, how damaging and hard it is to deal with. And so, fast forward now, I'm like, okay, I'm a little like taken aback from that. But I still keep teaching, and I'm trying to figure out like where my voice is. And then honestly, it took a while, but I found birth work. And I became a doula through Ancient Song Doula Services, which is located in Brooklyn. And it's run by Chanel Portia. And she is this beautiful Black woman, a mother of 6. And she is like on the front lines of policy work and she's in Albany actually a lot. And so she's a lot of the birth policy work that you hear about, she is like dealing with. So I trained with her, and at that point it was like clear to me that that was sort of like the intersection of like yoga activism and like birth work, like all of that, like advocating for Black and brown women. I mean, the mortality rates for Black and brown women are astronomical, especially here in Albany and New York, which is insane because I mean, right down the street here there's 3 hospitals. So to know that I mean, Tanisha can also speak on this. I know she doesn't work necessarily with birth, but you know, she knows a lot of this. I'm sure she could speak on it. But so just to know that, and all of these things that I kind of do, I'm like, Black people are really being pushed out and not advocated for. So that's sort of like where I've become. I mean, I'm 29 now, so it's taken me a long time to get here. But I think that through my experience and unpacking of how I grew up, it kind of like made me prepared for this. And then COVID hit, and COVID sort of like threw me into more activism work, because now I have the space, which is crazy because again, we live in a capitalistic society. So like I couldn't advocate for my life and for people who look like me because I had to work. And that's gross, you know, like that is like a really unfortunate thing. Like I can't stand up for my own rights as a person and say that I belong or that I matter or that my little brothers matter or that my parents matter or whatever, because I have to work. Like that's literally what it is. So COVID has opened up this whole other sort of like realm of possibilities for me. And so I've been, you know, fundraising and just doing reparations work and like kind of learning what that is at the same time. So raising funds and then redistributing back to the Black and brown community. And for me, it's not about giving money to people who are necessarily, I don't want you to think it's like Black people are poor and in need. It's money that's been deserved this whole time. And so like, that's like the biggest thing that I want people to know, is that the money that you give and you say is reparations is really reparations, because now the people, the white folk who've had a leg up on everything are now bringing us up. And it doesn't necessarily take just money. It takes advocacy. And again, that's why we're all here. So that's like the brief synopsis of what I do and who I am. Oh, and I also work a lot in customer service. So that's how I know everybody. And that's why I'm able to do a lot of this, because I've worked in customer service for my whole life and I talk a lot. So thank you.
Good. You're doing beautiful work. And as I said before, the sky's the limit. This is just, you're finding yourself now. And you're finding like, not now, but like everything that we go through every single day, you know, all these things that come at us in our lives, we take that and then it helps us become stronger every day. And you hold your brother's hands and you're like, let's go. We're now going to find a way. We're not being oppressed anymore. And this is something that, you know, you're extremely empowering. So thank you so much for being on the panel and
thank you for having me
tonight, and everyone listening, everyone watching. There's a reoccurring thing that you're going to hear. And you might hear it, you might not, but all the panelists are multidimensional in the gifts that they have, not just the gifts that they have for themselves and their family and their friends, but the community as well. Please go onto the website, look at their brief bios, get to know the panelists more. They have so much to give, and it's all about, you know, today we're going to talk a lot about, you know, joining hands together, listening to one another, you know, smiling at one another. This is a platform for us to educate ourselves and feel empowered, and to, like, everyone who showed up today, you're here because you believe, as I said before, you believe in love and hope. So thank you all so much for joining in. Our next panelist is Telly Robbie, or also known as TK.
So hello, everyone. My name is TK. I work as a clinician for an organization by the name of Ellis Pros. So I work with individuals with substance use disorders and mental health diagnoses and provide therapy and counseling for them. I sit on the board of New Choices Recovery Center. And I run 2 recovery community organizations. One of them is Friends of Recovery Schenectady, and the other one is Youth Voices Matter Schenectady. And the goals of those 2 organizations is to work on, right, how can we advocate for changes, particularly in the recovery community, prevention field and treatment field. But through my work in those organizations, I've been trying to add like that racial piece to it, because I think like that's a piece that gets left out most of the time. I started, I grew up in this place in the middle of New York, Sullivan County, New York. And I don't know if anyone knows exactly where that is, but it's this very rural area that's predominantly white, right? So I grew up in the country, on farms, and went to the school that was predominantly white. And I got this identity, right, of the token Black friend, right? Because I was the person who fit into the group of white people because I don't talk or sound like how they think Black people sound like, right? I fit into a mold that allowed them to feel uncomfortable, right? And while they were feeling comfortable, I felt that uncomfortability, right? Because it blurs lines like very, very easily. And so like, right, I dealt with like a lot of racist jokes. And it was this situation where, right, like I'm in this area surrounded by a whole bunch of white people. And it's kind of like, right, I felt like when I was younger, like I had to take it. I had to sit and I had to take it and I had to laugh about it, right? Because otherwise, right, I get into fights with people, right? My life is in danger if I don't go along with the norm. And as I progressed in my life, so one of the other things, I'm an individual in recovery. So I've been in recovery for 5 years for substance use disorder and for mental health diagnoses. And working, starting off in my recovery, I noticed like there wasn't a lot of people who looked like me in the recovery rooms, right, when I would go. And it felt like very, very isolating because there wasn't, again, like I was in the situation where I had to fit into the mold of society, right? And I couldn't be individualistic, right? And then not only was it this group of people that was predominantly white, but it was predominantly white and heterosexual. And so being gay and Black in America is like a very difficult life to live sometimes. And as I started my working with individuals with substance use disorders and mental health diagnoses, I noticed again, like here I am in the situation where like there's nobody who looks like me, right? Like if you look at the statistics, 86% of the psychiatrists and mental health workers in the world are white, right? And Black and brown people only make about like 2 to 6% of those therapists. So again, like I'm in this world where I'm trying to figure out how to blend in. And I feel like I have to assimilate, right, in order to be able to fit in and engage and keep my job even, right? Like I have to fit into their world. Otherwise, I won't be afforded some of the things that I've been given throughout my life. And like when everything kind of started to happen, like during COVID, and we saw things about like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and all of these other individuals who are dying, right? Like I really got me like motivated, like now while we're in this time, while again, like it's in the forefront again. And it's not like these are new things that are happening. It's been this repeated cycle that's happened throughout time where there's these injustices that are happening and then people acknowledge it for a little bit. And then they're like, okay, I think we've given enough time for it. And it gets pushed to the side and then the same cycle starts up again. So like going back and like reading through history and seeing all this stuff happening again, I'm like, okay, like I need to do something, right, to advocate in my realm. I can use my ability to be in this realm to advocate for change and change the ways that the systems itself in my job and in my community work. So that's a lot of what I've been doing. And so it's like hosting groups and forums that I do of talking about diversity and talking about racism and prejudice and homophobia and transphobia, and giving people the open space, one, to like talk about, right, what are your experiences and how have you experienced racism and other forms of discrimination throughout your life? And 2, how can we work on changing that, right? And a big part of like what we've been talking about is like focusing on these things like, right, like those little tiny nitpicky things, those microaggressions, because when people think about racism, they think about, right, slavery, they think about lynching, they think about police brutality and the KKK, but they don't realize those little slight things that continue to add to those systems of oppression. And, you know, one of the things that people always tell me, right? They always tell me, you know, you speak very articulately, right? And they think that, right, like it's a compliment. And I know in their heart of hearts, like they mean it to be a compliment sometimes, but they don't realize the damage that gets done when you do things like that and you engage in conversations like that. And so that's been one of the hardest things. It's like educating people about microaggressions and these little things that continue to increase to the system that we're in right now, and working on changing it.
You're a beautiful person.
Yeah.
Being such an advocate, being so strong within yourself to overcome substance, like fucking addiction. Like no one talks about addiction. No one talks about suicide, mental health, like all, like racism, all that shit. We need to talk more about it so we can help heal one another and help hold each other's hands, share resources, and have each other's back. Who gives a fuck? Like, if you look different from one another. Sorry, Mom, I cursed. I have to remind myself that I can't curse. But I just get so heated on it because we're all people, we're all human, we all deserve all of this. We all deserve it. Thank you so much for being a part of this panel and so much that you do for your community. You're not even from here and you're helping our community so much, right? You're from Sullivan County.
So now I live in Schenectady. So like
Yeah.
after like my whole journey, I was like, okay, like I need to move someplace different, right? And try to experience more diversity, right? Because growing up, again, like in the country, it's like I have to stifle my Blackness for people's comfortability. I have to stifle being gay for other people's comfortability and for my own safety, right? And like I thought that, right, like moving to a different place that was a little bit more diverse would change that. And it has, you know, in very minute aspects. But then I realized that, right, like the thing about racism is that it just changes its face. And so it's still there, but the way that it comes about is just different in each individual area.
Important to know that. Keep ourselves safe, keep yourself grounded, right? That's key. And then also, I'll come back to me, but having these conversations, these touchy conversations is key. Don't ignore them. Let's talk about racism. Let's talk about racism in the Black community, people of color, Asian communities, all these communities, and we need to talk about it more. And this is like not the beginning. We're gonna keep doing this more and more. It has to be talked about, no matter what age, no matter where you're from. Stop not like just ignoring it, because that's not gonna help anyone, right? Thank you, TK. Our next panelist is Ashley.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Whitesid, and I am a licensed social worker by trade and a healer and a lover by virtue and by calling. Oh, man. In terms of my journey to this space and this place, it has been so many twists and turns, and I was so grateful. I don't know if you did intentionally to go last, because it's been beautiful to see myself reflected in each of the panelists and in their stories. And the story of self-discovery by Jammella and TK, being a person of color in mental health and that complexity that comes with that advocacy. And excuse me, for Tanisha, and being able to be in a space where you're advocating, you're bringing Black voices to the forefront. It's just so beautiful to see this group culminate together, and how each of our experiences are integral and are a part of their experiences for each and every one of us. So that was awesome. I think this is beautiful. This is great. So in terms of the work that I've done in my journey here, I like I said, I'm a licensed social worker, and I work with, my day job is I work with students who have severe and persistent mental health in a school setting, and helping them to, with their symptoms, to be able to go back into a proper school placement back in their mainstream schools. So helping them with their symptoms, getting them some tools and some skills and getting them back into their home districts. I do own my own private practice where I see individuals, couples, families, kids. We run and facilitate group healing opportunities at Rooted, which is my favorite place on the face of this earth. Forget Disney. And that has been my bread and butter since I have long known. But what a lot of people don't know about me is that I do have a very heavy activist past, where we were working on the Fight for 15 campaign and raising the minimum wage to $15 for fast food workers, on working on education rights campaigns and making sure that our kids are getting the money that they need so that they can get education and be successful and have the opportunity to go out and do what we want to do. And I've done a lot of work in that advocacy role for many, 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 many years. And I feel called, and kind of like what Jammella was saying, COVID presented a very, very unique opportunity, in the sense that we're no longer in a space where stability and all of these constructs are not available to us. So we have to go out and make the world that we desire to see. And at that point, I felt called to slow down and to get quiet. And in my time together, I became very, very clear on the purpose that I am here to heal Black and Brown women who are the cornerstones of our community, to go out and then heal their communities from their healed space. And that is what I do. That is my purpose. That is why I've been placed here on this planet. And I do that through various methods of therapy, through education, through leadership, through mentoring, through just spending time, building relationship, having conversation. And in terms of the work that I do that is anti-racist, in my practice, I work with a lot of individuals on healing from everyday racism. That's what I've been calling, and I appreciated what TK was saying in terms of microaggressions, because oftentimes individuals do assert and believe that the only types of racism that are prevalent or that are real or valid are explicit, outwardly racist events. And the fact of the matter is, being a person of color, being a Black person in America, those events and the things that happen to you because of the color of your skin is a daily occurrence. And a lot of my work is helping women heal from those daily occurrences of the intersections of being both Black and woman, and then for myself also being queer, and coming into these intersections and saying, okay, holding all of these things, holding all the things that the world is throwing at me because I identify or I see myself in these spaces, what in the heck can I do to heal at this time and space in my life? And that is where I come in. And I love to work with people and walk with people and strategize and unpack and repack together and look at different perspectives and understand things differently and just learn an intimate knowledge about ourselves and our uses and sources of power and how we can tap into that moment to moment, day to day. And so I'm very, very grateful, and I'm so excited to be on this panel because we got some juicy stuff to talk about. And like these three other amazing panelists are about to be on it. So I'm so grateful. And I do also want to give big ups to my favorite place on earth, Rooted Healing. Please, please, please check out all of their offerings. They're all great. I know you can't say that about every place, but I promise you that there is well. And Tatiana, if you could drop the link in the chat as a resource. They offer various group healing opportunities, yoga, and everything's being offered as a pay-as-you-wish for what you can right now. So definitely check them out, and they are a phenomenal, phenomenal resource to individuals who are looking to better themselves. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You're so beautiful, and I appreciate you and being such a huge advocate for the mental health community, for the community with mental health. Like, we need more of you in the community.
Yeah, we all got trauma. We all got to heal. We all got it. We all got microaggressions. We all got our shit, our stuff. Sorry, I'm so sorry. You literally just said that. We all have our stuff that we bring to the table and that we also need to look at and explore. So no one's exempt. No one is exempt.
Yeah. And knowing that racism is trauma, it's extreme trauma, big T trauma. We need healing not just saying I'm saying in general, There needs to be more opportunities to heal in the community and having access to resources. And that's exactly what I'm going to put in the chat. But now that I got you, Ashley, I want to ask you the first question. Now, everyone, all of these questions were not my questions, but they're questions that you all submitted to me on SurveyMonkey. So thank you all so much for interacting with us and submitting your questions. So the first question for Ashley is, how can we help address mental health in Black communities given the additional negative stigmas they face? So what do you?
Whew. Whew. So the first part about that question is demystifying the stigma, right? And I always, and the first thing that I say is, if you fell down the stairs and a bone was popped out of your leg and you were like, oh man, look at my leg, this is crazy, but I'm just gonna ignore it. I'm just gonna get up, I'm just gonna walk, and it's gonna be fine. Oftentimes, if someone said that, you look at them like, yo, you're crazy, like you need to go to the hospital, you gotta go see somebody, and definitely making sure that you get that checked out. However, when it comes to our mental health, folks are always thinking like, oh gosh, like something's wrong. And I like to tell people, even if you don't have a regular relationship with a mental health provider, going once a year in the same way that you go for a physical is a great way to just take a moment to take stock and check in with yourself and saying, hey, am I doing good? Do I like the things that I'm thinking about? How do I feel about myself? How does this season of life work for me in this time? Is it working? Is it not working? Are there things that I like? Are there things that I don't like? Are there things that I want to change about myself? And that is really what the process of going through therapy or counseling is beginning to walk on this intimate relationship with yourself and learning and understanding who you are intimately, beyond words, beyond knowledge, beyond relationship, or outside of the relationship or labels that we may put on for other people. It's really coming back into you and saying like, oh, this is me and this is who I am. And a lot of times when people think about individuals who go to therapy, they say, oh, something has to be wrong. And that's not necessarily true. However, there are things that people want to work on and be better about. And another way that I explain it specifically to kids is I say, if you want to get better at a sport, you get a coach. If you want to get better at a life skill, or if you want to get better at communication, or if you want to get better at relationships, go see a therapist. Like it's the same exact thing. And it's just interesting for folks' perception. So the first thing in terms of Black mental health is demystifying the stigma around it, and knowing that just because you see a therapist doesn't mean or assume that anything is wrong or not okay, and taking that judgment that we often place on it off of it. And two, along with breaking down the stigma, is also just normalizing it. Because the fact of the matter, in the US today, I love stats. So in the US today, there are, out of the entire US adult population, 62% of Americans have a form of depression or anxiety. 62% of adult Americans can be clinically diagnosed with a form of depression or anxiety. And I just like to let people sit with that for a minute, because if you can talk about 2 out of 3 of your friends have some sort of mental health condition, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed, that they're struggling with, it kind of breaks down the idea that this is something that's separate from us, or it doesn't impact us, or it doesn't have an impact on the people that we love and that we work with. So again, breaking down the stigma, reminding people that this is all normal. This is just a part of the human experience and a part of the life that we live when we sign on to be here on this earth in this astral plane. When it comes to talking about mental health specifically in the Black community, something that I found very interesting that I love doing is group healing opportunities. We are people that like people, and we are people who have always been in community, and being apart or separated from community is abnormal to our nature, period. And being able to bring individuals who are all dealing with similar things, who come back into a space where they're able to support each other, who are able to be vulnerably honest, who are able to make mistakes, who are able to support each other and see each other and love each other through our learning and our growing process. And that is why group healing is so important and impactful and empowering. And on top of that, taking it a step further, specifically within the Black community, there is a lot of healing that goes back generational lines. So being able to have that space where you're healing yourself, you are also healing for your mother, your mother's mother, and her mother, and her mother, and her mother, and making sure that we're also operating in a space where we're making healing opportunities available to children, parents, grandparents, because they're often in relationship with each other intimately. So I think that's another big piece of what is going to drive our healing forward is making sure that we're getting everybody who wants to be involved in this collective healing process moving forward. And for us, for Black people, if there are any Black people watching or listening, either in live person or on the replay, I just want to let you know, if there is nothing else that I say that is of value or that you take from this conversation, be sure, be certain, and know you already have everything inside of you that you need to heal. I sit here, I love me some Palo Santo, I love me some crystals, I love all of this, and I think they're great technologies and tools, but remembering that at the end of the day, if you have you and you have breath, you have everything you need to heal. It is right here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was extremely empowering and eye-opening and very, very worthy. Worthy is just what the word that was coming up is so worthy on so many levels. My next question is for Tanisha. So this question is, being a healthcare professional and a performer, have you experienced racism at work or in your community, and how so? Like, what does it look like, or what impact does that have on you?
So, okay, I think I spoke a little bit about this. That is a great question. It's a heavy question, but I think I spoke about this when I introduced myself a little bit. Being a nurse, and in the field that I'm in long-term care, so I deal with a lot of our elders, a lot of our ancestors, grandparents, and things of that nature, and it strikes me every single day when I have to realize and remember that these people they're from a different time, right? Where some things were acceptable. And when it comes to also mental health, a lot of these patients go through different forms of it, whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia or an array of mental health issues. And they can get kind of stuck in a time loop. And the only things that they can remember are more physical memories or memories of their kids. So a lot of the times people look at me, they look at this queer Black woman with a bald head and they go, "Hey boy, can you help me with this?" And like I said, you have to separate yourself. You are not Tanisha Findley, the nurse. You are, you're their nurse. It's not about you, it's about them. So I deal with that almost every day. I have difficult patients that as soon as they look at me, they're like, absolutely not. I do not want her caring for me. And the problem is I'm the only nurse there. So there is no options. And then there you get the slew of, "Oh, get out of here. Don't touch me, you monkey, you nigga, you this, you that." And it gets some days better than others. But that is a constant. And I thought that if I left the long-term care field that I would kind of be away from that. I'm like, I was very dismissive about it. I was like, they're just stuck in their ways. There's not much we can do about that. So I worked in a doctor's office. Now, being a young Black queer woman in a doctor's office filled with older white women, and the only other people of color were doctors, who sometimes you get to see where the line gets drawn. Because a person of color may be in now a power position, they feel as though when it comes to dealing with other women or other people of color, when it comes to racism and slurs and things of that nature, they kind of want to stay clear from it. They want to separate themselves. They're like, I'm a doctor now. I don't deal with that because I'm in this power position. I got called colored by my coworker twice, and I realized how deep this can go and how dismissive people can be and how blind people want to be because they don't want to deal with the harsh realities that there's still racism, there's still microaggressions, even with people of this generation. I'm 26 and this woman was about, I think, 30. And she called me colored, and I said to her, I took it as an education moment. I was like, hey, let's try this. I was like, so I don't know what your background is, but we don't use colored anymore. I would prefer to be referred to as Black. And I was like, so she had a husband who was a dark-skinned Puerto Rican man, and this is a white woman. And I said to her, like, what do you, like, how do you speak to your husband? Is this how you speak to your husband? She goes, I call my husband everything under the sun except for the N-word. And I'm like, oh, so there are people around you that are making it acceptable for you to go out into the world and to speak to other people this way. So this is coming from a home base. This is not just you're just spouting it out to insult. So I spoke to a manager about it, and then the manager said to me, who was also white, well, what did you say to her to make her call you that? And I was just at a moment of defeat, which this happened a couple of years ago, but like now as I think about it, I really should have been more vocal about what happened. But I was in just such a moment of defeat and in such a moment of overwhelmed anger that I picked up my purse and I never went back to that job. I left at noon that same day. I was like, that's it. I can't allow myself to be put in these situations. And then when seeking out help from someone who's supposed to be there to help and cultivate a safe space for me, basically ask me why are you so hurt by this? What can you have done better to not have this person disrespect you so deeply? So then I go into the community theater realm. A lot of times the big money makers aren't as diverse as we'd like it to be. We have people doing Hairspray, which is a show predominantly about the Black experience, and we have children putting on bronzer. I've seen productions of West Side Story where there's a full Caucasian cast, but they think they can get away with it by dyeing their hair Black and putting on heavy accents. And the production team and the company who runs this thinks it's okay to erase an entire people's voice, which it's ridiculous to me. And I see it so much that it just makes me not want to participate. And this is something I love. And I'm looking at it as an adult's perspective. If I keep seeing this, what are the kids younger than me seeing? Are they seeing there's only spaces for happy Negroes in musicals, or the thug, or the baby mama, or these stereotypical damaging roles that can only give the students or anyone who's auditioning the idea that you can only be one thing as a Black person, or a person of color, or a queer person, or a non-binary person, because either you have to be a boy or you have to be a girl. What if you don't fit into that? Where are you now? Are you, oh, well, I guess I'll just be a lighting person, or I guess I'll just be backstage. No. We need to make a space. We need to open this up. We need to break down these barriers that are causing people to feel like, well, I can't perform here. I can't do this show because there's no roles for me. I can't do this show because it calls for a Black person, but they decided that Cindy, who's been with the company for 5 years, is great for the role, so she should have it. And we just need to make sure that we are looking at things from the top down, from auditioning processes to the production team who's running it. Why do you feel like you're the voice for this show? And why do you feel like you can do this when there are other people of color, minorities, voices that can be heard in this space? I think a lot of the times people need to step back from their egos and kind of look at it from a perspective of what's important now. What message are we trying to tell now? Why is it relevant? Let's not do 1776 because that show's not relevant to right now. And basically, it's just a show about a bunch of slaveholders. That's not the knowledge that I want to put into people's brains at this point in time. I want people to know that there are experiences, there are life choices that can be seen on a stage that can influence you for the rest of your life as a young person of color minority. And it's all around. So this committee that we started, we've seen it too many times. And all of us in this committee have experienced one show that we were in that solidified the fact that there needs to be change on a top-down level. We want to break down the handbook. What's going on in the handbook? How are we tailoring our choices and our productions and the activities we do in the community to the people that are in the community? So the theater that we're working with is in Schenectady. Schenectady has a very diverse population. We have a lot of Caribbean people, Pacific Islanders, we have Black people, white people, we have so many different people. But when we do these shows and we go and look in the audience, all we see are old white people. Why are we not reaching the community that we are in? And when you look on the stage as well, how come we aren't representing the people that are in the community? So we're trying to break down those barriers and we're trying to get to the bottom of this and also make sure that we're checking everybody who feels like microaggressions are okay. We're trying to unpack it and we're trying to repack it. I stole that from her. I love that. And I think it's important work because art is how people express themselves. Art is so deeply rooted in your psyche, in your mind, in your everyday life. Just the beautiful painting or cloth behind you, Tatiana, is art, and someone put their soul into that. So it's easy translated in the theaters, but if you're feeling like you have no place to go, you're stifling that art, and it sucks. And I stifled it for 2 years, but I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of stifling things. I'm tired of feeling hurt and not saying anything. I have a mouth, I have a voice, I have a big ass mouth, as everybody also knows, and I can speak to Jamela's experience of being in a white space and feeling like nobody's listening. And it's so crazy. And no slack to any of our friends, but it's when me and Jamella would see each other at events or at parties or at people's houses, we would look each other like straight in the eye and just go, "You're here." And it was a comfort thing. It was as if we were uncomfortable with our friends. It was just like we needed to know that there was someone else there like us, and that's a comfortability thing. And it feels good to see people that you can identify with. So I want that on the stage, basically, period.
Wow. I love your big mouth. Ever since I met you, I was so drawn to you. You have such a beautiful energy. You're so creative. And all these panelists, you are so beyond empowering to all of us. And
thank you.
Having Jammella there, having other people that look like you, that you get it and you know each other and you got each other's backs and you have that eye contact, I see you, I love you, I got you. That's something that a lot of done. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
That gotcha moment. Yeah.
When you were talking about when you were talking about the why can't Black people be for example, Peter Pan. I read this book called Amazing Grace, which huge, reading Rainbow book. Remember reading Rainbow, everybody? I hated reading as a kid, but I'd watch that show all the time. But I read this book all the time to third graders. And at the moment where Grace, she's always been a performer. She wanted to be like, they were having the play Peter Pan, and in the book, and she wanted to be Peter Pan. And in the picture, you'll see it. She has her hand up and she's looking straight up like this, you know, like looking up saying, I want to be Peter Pan. And everyone around her, right? Raj, who was Indian boy that was her student, he was like, you can't be Peter Pan, that's a boy. And the white girl next to her, I forget her name, she was like, you can't be Peter Pan, he's in black. And it's like, right when I read that section of the book, the kids, all of them are like, oh, that's terrible. And I'm like, isn't it?
Why not?
Why?
Yeah.
Stop. And
it
I'm
doesn't
like,
make
why?
any sense.
So just that, it's in the book. Yeah, Claire just said in the chat, she knows that book. And the Amazing Grace books, please, I will give all of you, if you do not know that book, I will give them all to you guys. I have a ton at my job here, like just to donate. Books, education, just what you said, rather than like beating that girl's, you know what I mean? Rather than getting aggressive on her, you were like, hold up. I'm better than this. Let me educate you because you obviously need it.
And that's the problem, is that you have to be better. You have to be better. You have to. Because the moment you come out of character, the moment you get ghetto, that's when people go, that's exactly what I thought you were. Yep, you're exactly what I thought you were. So it's all about restraining yourself, because you're not representing yourself only. When you're in that setting and you're by yourself, it's not about just you. It's about anybody or everybody else who could step into that role, into your role. And you want to, and it's almost as if you're trying to protect all Black people in a way, because you don't want to spread this connotation that we are violent, aggressive people, when it's only the news media that portrays people like that. When they call Black men super predators, that is an inhuman way to talk about a person. But it's always there. There's always that moment where they're like, is she gonna pop off? And you have to take yourself back and go, look at it. Don't do it here. Don't do it now. This is not the time and place. You have to uphold your integrity. You have to uphold who you are as a person, because you're proving everyone right when you bug out. And it's the weirdest place to be in, when you know you're right and you know that you have the right to be angry, but you can't show it in a way that's intimidating, because anything is intimidating. It sucks. It's terrible.
Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable and sharing these stories of your life and really helping all of us be.
Oh yeah, no.
And it's extremely important to have these conversations, ask each other, how's it like, be there for one another on other levels than just liking their Instagram picture.
Reposting.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tanisha. Jammella, I would like to ask a question for you. And there's a question that, well, it's not a question. It just states, this person just stated, thoughts on making yoga classes safe and inviting for Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
That's a really hard one that I've been dealing with a lot lately for myself as a teacher within very white facing studios. First and foremost, I no longer feel safe. So I'm going to say that. I no longer feel safe in spaces that I once felt safe in. I feel tokenized. I feel weaponized. I feel unsupported. I feel, for lack of a better phrase, like the black sheep. And so I want to put that out there, that I am actually currently dealing with that on my own, and what I want to do. And I'm so thankful and grateful for places like Rooted that exist for us, for all people, but specifically a place for Black people to be and be held and to feel safe. And me as a Black woman, like, I never had spaces for me growing up in Clifton Park. Like, And so again, joining into a community that was predominantly white was like, I didn't realize was a thing until a few years after. So just to like put that one out there, I'm reevaluating where I stand and what I will accept from my fellow yoga community members. And that's something that has been really difficult because I've been teaching alongside some of these people for years and years and years. But like, honestly, if you are not on my side, then I can't share space with you. And that's something that I need to hold myself up to. And I need to, again, in that capitalistic way, I need to like make sure that I'm not just doing things for money. And like yoga for me was never for money, but then it became sort of my job and I started becoming successful at it. And so it came easy and I could move through all these spaces. You know, I'm the palatable brown person. I have light eyes, I have light hair, I'm curly, I'm quirky, I'm fun, I'm loud. I'm the archetype of like, you know, people want me around, they feel safe with me. I'm a support person. That's what I want to do. That's what I want people to, that's why I do this work, because I want people to feel comfortable with themselves. I want people to feel to feel held and to be seen. And Danny has said, like, you know, making it accessible for all body shapes. Like, I'm not the tall, skinny white lady, you know, I'm short, I'm thick, I'm curvy, and I'm flexible, and I'm like everything that people are confused by. And I'm proud of that, because why are you confused? Like, what is that that you think the archetype actually is? And how are you, like, if, you know, I'm like, you know, I put myself up against other white teachers and I'm like, well, maybe someone's not coming to my class because I don't look like them. And honestly, it might be the case. And that's really sad. And so it takes people like me and like, you know, the 10 or 15 of us that are in Albany to like, you know, we're tokenized everywhere we go. I'm on all these, like, you know, not this panel, but like other panels, people are asking me to do things. And I'm like, I'm the only Black person. Why are there 7 other white people? And your diversity, you know, it's just, it's crazy. But for yoga to make it more inclusive, I mean, for me, when I was thinking about this question before, I think that there should be a fund for Black people at every yoga studio, like 100%. And I've raised money. I will give them if I feel that they're in line with what I believe in and what we believe in as a community. And there are very few of them. So there should be a fund for Black people. Like, it should be reparations to go to a yoga class. Like, there should be money set aside. If you're brown, when you walk in that studio, they should just sign you in and let you go. Like, you shouldn't have to pay. And the other white community members should be paying for them. And like, for us to feel safe, there needs to be like other people that look like us in the classes, and it starts from the top. There need to be more teachers of color, and those teachers of, like, the people who are teaching those teachers need to also be of color. You know, when I get trained, I'm getting trained by only white people, and then I feel again left out, and I'm a yoga teacher. How do these young people who want to do yoga, how do they feel safe going to be taught by white people? You know, and then they kind of parade us around like, oh, I gave this Black person a scholarship, and it's like, why? Why can't you just give it? I've seen it too many times. Like, you gave a Black person a scholarship, so you've done the work. You're good. You know, you've satisfied. You've scratched that itch. You know, you've itched that scratch, whatever the phrase is. But it's sickening to me, because people are, again, it's like, goes back to what I said earlier. They give you the community class, so more Black people will come. It's like, no. Like, when your yoga studios are in places that are not accessible for Black people, or in spaces that are, you know, if your yoga studio is in a community of only white people are going to go. And then the one Black person is going to be like, there's no Black people here, I'm not going to come back. And then people tell me all the time, I'm like, well, I don't see any Black people in this class. And they're like, well, did you see this one person? Everyone knows the name of the Black student, always. And they always use them as the scapegoat. And it's like, yeah, exactly, Portia. You don't have to parade the Black people around. It should just be open and accessible. And like, again, it's not, reparations don't mean that Black people are poor. It just means that this is space that's deserved of them. And like, these scholarships to train teachers, like, we should have a fund for teachers, for Black people to become teachers. It's not just going to the classes. That's not enough. Like, you need to be able to, there should be, half of your class should be Black people. It should be non-binary people. It should be trans people. It should be, you know, anybody under the LGBTQIA, like, scope. Like, it should be everyone. And it's not. It literally isn't. And I refuse to be the only one anymore. And it's like, for me, like Tanisha said, she said she almost stopped, or she did stop doing theater. And how sad is that? When you hear Tanisha speak, you listen. You see her, and you are empowered. You are empowered because you see her doing that. And like, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. I personally, I'm sorry. I almost stopped teaching yoga because no one looks like me, and I feel left out. I feel that my voice isn't loud enough, and I feel like I don't matter, and I feel like I'm not good enough, and I feel like I don't get hired because I'm Black. And I've wanted to throw in the towel during this time, the past 4 months. I wanted to throw in the towel, but I can't. I can't do it because I am important, and I am here for people who feel like me and that have a space to feel safe. And I want everybody to feel safe with me because I feel so unsafe. And to feel unsafe just walking in the world, and then to go into a space where you feel like you have to put on a show, like we're performing, and not in the way that, again, not in the way that Tanisha does, but in the way that, so that no one is mad at me. I'm afraid to play music that I like. I'm afraid to play music by Black artists because I don't want it to be too Black. And it doesn't, what does that mean? What is that? Yeah. And it took so much out of me to stand up to myself and to not gaslight myself, and to be brave enough and to be the strong person that I am, because I have no other choice. We have no other choice. When I'm up there, it's not for me. It's for us. It's like, I'm taken out of it. I don't care if it's my face up there. I don't care if my name is on the thing. It's for us. It's to make us feel that we have a part in healing, and it's so beyond. And I'm sorry I'm crying, but I'm not sorry I'm crying, because this is emotional for me. This is my existence. And like, yoga has been so harmful to me for a thing that I've loved for so long, and by the people who have always said to me that, like, you're doing great, you know, like, I feel like some yoga studios were gonna let me go, but because I'm the only Black person, they don't. You know, and it's like, that sucks. That hurts to know that, like, you're keeping me around because of my skin. And it's like, just at one point not knowing what that meant, because it's taken some time to really understand myself and the world, that felt okay. Like, oh, I'm Black, so they're keeping me around. That's disgusting. Like, you shouldn't keep me around because I'm Black. You should keep me around because I'm valuable. And so, like, I can't be in these spaces where you only see my skin. I can't. But then at the same time, I need you to see my skin. I need you to know that it's taken me 29 years to be able to say with conviction that I'm a Black woman. And I stand proud in that. Don't call me African-American. Don't call me Afro-American. I am Black with a capital B. And I don't care what anybody has to say. Like, don't call me color. Don't call me a Negro. Don't call me anything. I'm a Black woman. It has taken me so long to be able to say that, and to stand and to walk down the street with my chin up, and to not be fazed by anybody. And then when I bring that back to the yoga community, it gets erased, and that's it. Like, so what I think is that, like Tanisha said, from the top down, the people who are teaching these classes, they need to be Black. The people that are being taught this yoga need to be Black. The people who are in these classes need to be Black, and there needs to be the space that is for all. And it doesn't mean that Rooted is the only place that offers that. Like, Rooted is the Black friend. Rooted is tokenized. I see it through everything. Everybody says it. I've spoken to so many people who are like, but there's Rooted, so that it's done, it's fixed. And it's like, no, every studio needs to have that. When you have 15 teachers on staff, I'm the only Black person. Why is that? The hot yoga spot has 100 teachers and there's one Black person. How is that possible? And I've talked to the people and they say, well, no one's applying, or it didn't work out. Seek them out. And it's not racist to seek a Black person out. Ask them to teach. Like, that's it. Stop tiptoeing around the word Black. Stop tiptoeing around the idea of reaching out to a Black person. Just do it. Just say, hey, will you teach in my studio? Hey, will you come to my thing? Hey, and pay them. Like, pay them. That's it. That's how you make it more inclusive. That's it. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Nah,
yes,
you better
ma'am.
stop apologizing.
Okay,
Don't you
yes.
apologize for nothing, honey. Stand in that light.
And you said that.
Stand in it.
Period.
I'm like, I wasn't gonna
live.
cry, but here I am crying.
No, bitch, cry, because no, like no, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's so hard to feel so caged and to feel like everyone's always watching you to see what outrageous things you're gonna do next. Like, I always felt like that. People always felt like that. When you're the token Black friend, it's like, oh, look at this wild animal that we've captured and we have as our friend. And oh, we have Black people here. There goes Tanisha and Jammella over in the corner.
Always,
It's
always. And Tanisha was so
It's
right.
always
Like
us.
when we go to parties, it's like we look at each other and we're like, okay, and like you already know if something happens that we have to band together. Granted,
And
our
get the
friends
fuck
are
out.
so
It's
supportive
crazy.
and are so wonderful, but we often go into spaces where like it's only some of our friends, and then the other people are like are outliers, and like they say some crazy stuff, and I have so many friends who have witnessed it. And it's like that's the other part of this, is that sharing our stories. And like I've been sharing my stories for forever and people never believed me, but now people are finally listening. And it's like funny, like I used to have to be really loud to be heard, and now I can be a little bit more quiet and people hear me, is because they're listening and they're paying attention. And it's like it's so exhausting to go into to always talk and to always have to unpack and to always like be the one that has to be like, but no, this is wrong, and explain. And like, you know, someone said something to me yesterday, like people say stuff to me every day, or they will mock me in a way that's like acting like I'm being like Tanisha again said, like that stereotypical Black woman, where people are like, oh no you didn't, and like all, and I'm like, I don't even talk like that. Maybe when I'm joking, but like I don't talk like that. And it's like, it's so crazy to me. So again, going back into a space that's predominantly white, like a yoga studio, I have to be like on my P's and Q's. And then as soon as I stop and I start acting more like myself, I see some students start to disappear, but then I see the students that are meant to be with me and that feel more comfortable, because me, I'm speaking in my truth. I'm not playing Indian chant music. I love it. It's beautiful. I like to listen to it when I go, but now I'm playing Leon Bridges. I'm playing Mary J. Blige. I play Erykah Badu. That's the music I play in my class. And I'll play Kendrick Lamar. I'll play music that is not just by Black artists, but that speaks to me, because I can be more authentically myself when I'm curating my own comfortable space. And so that is like, it's just crazy. Sorry, I'm taking up time.
No.
Sorry. Stop saying sorry.
You are valid, girl.
I'm happy you're here.
Thank you. Me too.
So much.
Me too.
Thank you so much. And seeing this vulnerability that you're showing, it's been real. It's always been real. You've always been real. Ever since I met you back in 2008. It's been a minute.
It has.
So we need these, even with myself, like even in other classes, I've cried. And people are like, oh my, no, I don't care, because we need to see this authenticity and vulnerability for one another so we can heal together, you know? Thank you so much for being authentic and being Jammella and being a Black woman in the yoga community. And yes, Rooted is doing so much, but there needs to be more, you know?
Other studios need to step
only
up.
Do so much. They do enough already. Rooted does so much already. So yes, like there's no fucking excuses. End it. Let's add more diversity into the yoga community and to other communities. I want to ask TK question. So being a Black queer male in recovery from substance use disorder, do you think that there's a lack of Black community members accessing treatment options for their own recovery? Like, do you see a difference? Like, do you think it might be self-inflicted choice or a systematic lack of resources and awareness for the Black community to get support and guidance for their addiction?
So I think for one, like one of the main reasons, and we kind of touched upon this a little bit, one of the main reasons why it's so hard to see like this diversity in these recovery communities is, again, because you go to these clinics and these treatment centers and there's this lack of comfortability because there's not people who look like you, right? There's not people who you can work with in a treatment setting who are going to understand what you go through. And there's this fear that, right, I'm going to go in and I'm going to engage in treatment, I'm going to be misunderstood. And oftentimes, like 9 out of 10, that happens a lot, where Black and brown people and individuals of other races go in and they're misunderstood, and they get misdiagnosed for things, and they get improper treatment, and they get sort of, again, put in these boxes because of who they are. And I think the system itself for Black and brown people has been so out of whack. Like, if you look back in time, right, like Benjamin Rush, who was like the father of psychiatry, right? Like, he had this phrase that he used called negritude, right? And when being Black was meant to be like this bad health crisis, and you're Black because there's something wrong with you physically and mentally. And then even moving forward, there's individuals like Samuel Cartwright who coined phrases like drapetomania, where it's, right, Black people are crazy because they want freedom and they want to be able to like live their lives and be happy and healthy. And I think the system itself has kind of worked on marginalizing Black people. And a lot of times they go into these situations, they go into substance use treatment, or they go into mental health treatment already having these years of being institutionalized. So it's like, okay, here I go again, being put into another institution. And oftentimes, right, they don't get the same chances that other people get. A lot of times, like, if you mess up once, that's it. We're calling your parole officer, your probation officer, whoever it is that's in charge of your case, and that's it. And you're going back to jail. So it's this fear, like, right, if I keep engaging in all of these systems, who are going to turn against me, and I'm going to end up back incarcerated again and living in the system. And even for myself, again, like working in this field, you don't see a lot of Black and brown people working in this field whatsoever. And it can be very ostracizing. And when we have groups, like when we talk about things like racism and we talk about diversity, it can be very scary to be in those rooms and talk about it when the crowd is predominantly white, because a lot of times you're in this crowd all by yourself trying to defend yourself against people who either don't want to understand or who are having a hard time understanding it. And kind of like, you know, Tanisha was saying, right, if you speak out against it and you say something that's against the norm, all of a sudden you're crazy, right? And that's part of the thing, is like when Black and brown people are in these mental institutions and treatment facilities, they get put into this box where as soon as they become angry, right, or they become what's perceived as aggressive, they're instantly perceived as a threat. And then once they're perceived as a threat, that decreases their chances of being able to engage in treatment. So very frequently, they're kicked out of treatment, or codes are called on them, and they're not even allowed the chance to engage in treatment like everyone else is able to. You know, and it's tough, right? Because it's like figuring out how do we work on changing that culture itself in these treatment facilities. And when you're in a facility where people aren't willing to have the discussion and work on things like that, it makes it very difficult for people to want to engage. Like working with my clients, right? One of the things that happens is that when we haven't heard from someone in a significant period of time, they're not answering calls or letters in the mail, we have to do wellness checks. We're like supposed to go and do wellness checks where we call the police department to go and do these wellness checks, to knock on their door and check on them and see how they're doing. And doing these, I'm like so terrified at my job to have to do these wellness checks for Black and brown people, because I'm like, okay, if I do this wellness check and they're acting weird, they're acting what people deem as weird or not normal in their eyes, they might die. And that's a very scary reality that they face. And so oftentimes, like, people start to veer away from treatment because they're worried, I'm going to be misrepresented, I'm going to be misjudged. And if I'm saying things that don't make sense to people, then all of a sudden that means that I'm crazy, because it's not making sense to all of those other individuals. And it's really, really hard, because there's not a lot of people who can understand like the language that Black and brown people use. And so because they can't understand that language, they automatically deem that, right, this person isn't able to engage in treatment, right? If someone's explaining that because of these choices, right, I don't want to do this, all of a sudden you're labeled as non-compliant, and then you're kicked out again. So all these cards are like stacked against you, where, right, like you have to be so on your P's and Q's because you don't have very many opportunities to slip up. Because once you do, right, it's a call to the parole officer, it's a call to probation, and then you're sent back into prison all over again. And a lot of individuals that I've worked with, a lot of Black and brown people, like they feel like treatment can be a trap. And in some ways it kind of is. In a lot of ways it really can be a trap, because you're working with a system that doesn't understand you and that doesn't know how to treat you with respect, right? And with decency, and know how to like properly give you proper care. And we talk about when, you know, you go to school and you go for social work and human services, you go and you learn about things like cultural competency, right? And cultural competency in itself, right, it's one of those things that it's well-intentioned, but cultural competency in itself can do a lot of damage, because cultural competency has the ability to all of a sudden, again, we're labeling people and we're saying, right, because you're this color, right, and because you come from this culture, that means that these are your beliefs, and that means that this is what you do. And it stops us from being able to treat people effectively, because we're sticking them into a box again, right? And so one of the things that, and I was reading this article about cultural humility, and I read about it and I learned about it, and I feel like that's a really effective tool, right? Because with cultural humility, you're acknowledging, right, people's races, ethnicities, and religions, but you're not using that as the sole factor of how you treat them. You're still treating them as an individual within that particular culture. And I feel oftentimes, more than not, Black and brown people are put again into these boxes, and they're not able to be treated effectively. And if they're not able to be treated effectively, what we deem effectively, then it's non-compliant, and then we can't treat you anymore. And then they're left out in, you know, out in the world without any help whatsoever.
Wow. And it's just like a fucking chipmunk in the, what is it called? The cage.
Right.
What is that, like wheel, right? Wow. Revolving door. Thank you, Victoria. That too. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I was thinking you were thinking of like a hamster on a wheel.
Yeah, just fucking trying to get up, trying to lift up and thrive, but you're just stuck because they put right in the wheel.
Right, and you get into the cycle,
that is
right?
The Black experience.
You get stuck in that hamster wheel where, right, like you end up being deemed, right, not fit for society. So you're thrown into a psych hospital, or you're thrown into a jail. So then you lose things like housing, you lose things like employment. And then when you get out of the psych hospitals and you get out of treatment and you get out of jail, you're left and sent out into the world with nothing. And so now that you've been incarcerated and you've been put into the system, now there's all these extra life demands that are being placed on you. So you have to go and try to find employment. You have to be engaged in school of some sort. You have to make sure that you're going to substance treatment. You have to make sure that you're going to mental health treatment. You have to make sure that you're attending all of your DSS appointments. And that's a lot to put on one person to do. And if you stray even a little bit, again, then you get in trouble, and then you're sent back into prison. You're sent back into treatment because they're saying you're not being compliant, you're not following orders, and it starts the cycle all over again, right? And I think it's like some of these things that people take for granted, like being able to just live life, right? Like your average everyday Joe, because the demands of treatment and engagement are very, very high. And for a lot of people, right, it's hard to engage fully in all of these systems, right, and still maintain your recovery, right? So you have all the stress from trying to meet all of these demands. So chances are, right, people tend to relapse, right? Or your mental health symptoms start to worsen. And then again, you're right back into the system all over again, starting from square one.
Oof.
Yeah. It's, do you know Alice Green? She is a role model of mine ever since I started working at the Addictions Care Center of Albany. And she works, I think she's like the director or in charge of the Justice Center.
Oh yes, I've met her actually when I was in elementary school. She's amazing.
Okay, so working in the addiction field, and I'm a prevention educator, so I'm out in the schools teaching kids kindergarten through 6th grade about all like prevention stuff. Who's a safe person in the community? Where's a safe place to go? And I need to cater to all of my students, not just this little boy, not just that little girl, everybody. That's how I am. Right? That's just who, like a teacher, who I am, is I include everyone. And I want to make sure to give resources for everyone and include everyone, because we all deserve it, right? Because we have so much opportunity, so much ahead of us in our journey. I'm just going to make this quick, but Alice Green, I was at a event about opiates, right? Now, a big thing is opiate addiction. White people are dying. And Alice goes, what about the crack era? When all of my people were dying, where were you? Where was the environmental strategies? Where was this?
They were starting the war on drugs.
Yeah. Like, okay, so now people are dying, and I'm not trying to minimize heroin deaths and opiate deaths and anything like that. But
We've been there
from the beginning, this difference. And it is not okay. And she is a huge role model of mine. Please, everyone, Google Alice Green.
Yeah.
Albany,
When it comes to white people, it's treatment. When it comes to Black people, it's a war on drugs. And I never understood that. I never understood the disconnect. I know someone who struggles with heroin addiction, obviously, and I spoke to their mother, and a lot of the times the mother saw the difference in the treatment of Black people compared to the treatment of her son, who was white. And she's like, you know, I see the same people, like revolving doors, going in and out of treatment centers, and then I see the same people who were in the same spot, have the same convictions, have the same addictions, have the same problem on the street panhandling. And it's like, where are the resources for those people? Like, it's so hard to distinguish jail time versus treatment when it comes to people of color. Yeah, it's insane.
And I think, and I appreciate what so much of TK had to say about systems, because oftentimes we can forget that systems are so impactful and so empowering in how these micro things happen, right? They are the structures that are in place in order to help these little things happen. And it's interesting, and I hold the philosophy that systems are built from compliance and not treatment, right? So these systems, these organizations are built for you to adhere to a certain standard that isn't necessarily predicated on what you need or what is actually going to be healing for you, but you have to hit a checklist so that I can say to our Medicaid funder that we did everything
helped you.
possible.
Yeah.
So that way, when you, if you, now I'm going to say if, because I worked in rehabs, I worked in addiction field before. So when you relapse, we can say, oh, we tried everything possible.
We did everything we could.
Like, I don't know what else. I don't know what else to do. And so I see systems and organizations, and even working in a school, which is a whole nother ball game in terms of looking at the discrepancies and the disproportionality of like how Black girls are suspended at higher rates for having, and especially in a school with students who have mental health, for Black boys being suspended out of school at a higher rate than white boys who have the same diagnosis and the same behaviors, who are engaging with each other and the same behavior. And so it cuts me deep. It cuts me deep when you see it up close like that, and it makes me fight harder, because you know, y'all not gonna be out here treating us like this.
No.
We're gonna get our own systems and our own places, thank God for Rooted, and our own organizations, so that way I don't even gotta worry about you.
Nope, you don't gotta worry about me.
Right.
Exactly.
I digress.
Thank you all so much. And I just want, and we're actually running out of time, but I really want to ask each and every one of the panelists how, like the last question for each and every one of you to answer is, should I just had it? Okay, for allies, how can allies in the community amplify Black voices? How can they, so give maybe a couple examples, and even if you're thinking of more, you can add them to the chat as well. So what does allyship look to you, or what is an example of an ally? Can Ashley start with that?
I'm very excited to start with this one. Absolutely. Allyship, and I'm going to talk from the context of mental health because that's very important. And I keep bringing it up because it is important and we have to keep talking about it. Allyship and Black mental health means asking your friends, how are you really? It means sitting with them in uncomfortable stuff. It means owning up to when you mess up and going through the process of reconciliation and renegotiation of relationship to repair. Allyship for mental health looks like, or could look like, paying for a session for another person. It could look like paying for any number of classes, organizations, certifications. It could look like just smiling at a Black person and not expecting them to smile back. And knowing that however they present or show up is already good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Tanisha?
So in my realm, healthcare can, like in the theater arts. So number one, do not audition for parts that you are, if they're doing girls and you are a lily white woman, please do not try to be any of the dream girls, or, you know, try to lend your hand in other ways. How can you, you can be a set builder, you can be a stagehand, you can be in the orchestra, you can be in the pit, you can be backstage. There are so many other realms. Leave space and room for people of color, marginalized people, to put themselves on the forefront. In the healthcare field, listen to Black people when they are in the medical field, that Black people don't feel pain the way others do, that we have a high pain threshold. Well, on a mental health kind of aspect, I guess so, because if you are a conscious Black person walking around every day and you are aware of every single injustice that is coming to you, you would probably have a nervous breakdown. You would never want to leave your house. You would never want to go outside. You would never want to watch TV. So making sure that you're listening and digesting, and not just saying, I'm a sponge, use me. No. You have to do the work yourself. Stop using your Black friends and your people and your marginalized friends and your indigenous friends and everybody else to do the work for you. You have to do your own research. Black people are not walking encyclopedias of how you as a white person, or you as an Asian person, you as a Spanish person, or you as anybody in this world, on how to conduct yourself. Conduct yourself and listen. When someone says you hurt them, talk. Have dialogue. Dialogue is the most important thing to coming to conclusions. And when you're just kind of coming back and being combative to someone's experience, that's not listening. Like, you have to take yourself away from yourself and also look at how you're reacting to someone's pain, someone's hurt, someone's experience, and making sure that you are turning off the little head, the little voice that says, no, maybe they're overreacting, or maybe that didn't happen the way that you think it happened, or maybe you're misinterpreting. That's a thing that a lot of people like to throw in there. Maybe you misinterpreted. Well, my body and the way I feel didn't misinterpret how I reacted to that. So exactly that. Just, and also in the burlesque realm, when it comes to Black bodies, we are not to be sexualized, although the biggest misconception is that burlesque is about sex. It is not about sex. It is an art form that uses your body to express a message. And sometimes that message may be sensual. Sometimes that message may be political. Sometimes that message is just that I love myself and I fucking love my Black body and nobody's gonna take this shit away from me, period. So to make sure that when you're giving compliments to Black performers, or that when you're bringing in Black performers, that they feel comfortable, that you're asking the right questions. Okay, what are you comfortable with? What is your comfortability when it comes to people touching you? What is your comfortability when it comes to compensation? Because a lot of the times, you know, some Black performers they're just happy to be there because they have not had the space to perform. And because we're just happy to be there, sometimes we'll take a little less. But in my experience, if you're working with the right people and if they're respecting you the way they respect every other performer, you should be compensated and you should feel comfortable. Even if you are stark naked in front of a crowd of strangers, you should feel comfortable and secure. So that's how I think people could be a good ally in that aspect.
Period.
Period, poo.
Love it. Jammella.
Yes.
How do you see, how can allies amplify Black voices, and what does ally look like to you?
I mean, Ashley and Tanisha said it very, very well. So I'm like, what else can I put in? So I just want to echo that. And I can really speak to the like combative nature of white people who feel guilty. And I've experienced that a lot. And I just want to, again, use the word echo, but like echo the fact that you need to listen and sit with what's painful, and to like absorb. And like, I'm one Black person. I'm very accessible for a lot of white people. And so people just hear me and assume that it's just my experience, but like a lot of the experiences I have, all Black people have, and in some form. And especially with like colorism, if you're unfamiliar, please look that up. There's a lot of colorism that goes on. There's the pretty privilege, there's all these things. And so to be an ally, also, don't just listen to me, listen to the experience of other Black people, you know? And I think that that's super, super important, because my experience, although I might be able to understand Tanisha's experience and know Tanisha's experience, but her experience is entirely different than me. We look entirely different. You know what I mean? And to just like not give all of your guilt to Black people. I have people every day in my inbox just telling me their story about how they were racist and they found the light. And it's like, that is just as emotionally triggering as being racist to me. Like it's the same thing. And although, you know, I appreciate it, it's just, you don't need to air it out with me. The way that I see that you're doing better is by just doing better and being better. And so that is, for me, that's how we do it. And I mean, if for some of you who don't know me, like I've been doing, Tanisha's wearing one of my shirts, Black Lives Matter shirts, and I have, thank you, and I have decals and stuff, and I see a lot of people doing that as a performative stunt, and whether it be my thing or not, but just using the phrase Black Lives Matter. So please, yes, bless you, please go beyond that. Like I love that you buy my sticker, because that money is going to places like Rooted, and it amplifies our neighborhoods and whatnot, but like we really need to just do more than that. And so being an ally is by picking up a book by a Black author versus a white author. It means listening to podcasts by Black people and sitting in that uncomfortableness that you don't understand, because we have to sit in spaces that we're uncomfortable in every single day. So just being uncomfortable and like noticing why you feel uncomfortable. What is it about that uncomfortability that you are experiencing for yourself? You know, I have a lot of white friends in my life, and like I've had to be very uncomfortable for them. I've spent my entire life making myself uncomfortable, like Tanisha said, for white people to feel comfortable. And then I can never show up as all of us have said. I've never been able to show up 100%. And again, in my 29th year, I'm now just being able to show up. And so imagine your whole life you can't show up. So just listen, sit back, be uncomfortable, do all the work that we've had to do for our whole lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And TK.
So again, right, everyone said, right, a lot of the things, and I think it's just to continue to reinforce, like, right, like putting in that real work and effort to understand and check your biases, check your stereotypes, check those things and understand microaggressions. Like, people don't understand that microaggressions is like a broad term that gets broken down into micro insults, and all sorts of other categories, right, and themes, and like understanding what that really means to engage in microaggressions, right? And kind of like Jammella said, dealing with that uncomfortableness that you feel and like working through it. And I always like to encourage people, uncomfortableness is our body's signal of telling us that we're about to start a process of change. So instead of trying to work past, instead of trying to stuff that uncomfortableness, going through it and working through it to get to the other side. And that's really important because that's how we learn and we grow as human beings every single day. And I think being an ally is standing up and advocating, right, with your family members and with your friends, and not saying, oh, because no Black people are around, that doesn't mean that I have to say anything to my white family members. No, like, be just as loud and vocal as ever with them and help them to understand it too, right? And being an ally means, right, not just surface and representational allyship, right, but real actual things, right? It's not as much as just like painting Black Lives Matter on a street sign, right? It's not as much as taking Aunt Jemima off the fucking syrup, right? It's like doing like real thorough work inwardly and changing your perceptions and your beliefs and your mindset, right? So that way people aren't dying because of it anymore, right? And that's one of the most important things. And I think it's, right, also being able to address, right, Black and brown and indigenous and people of other races as an entirety. And it's not picking and choosing which members you choose to celebrate and support. So that means that you're supporting gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, non-binary people as well. And you're not leaving them out of the loop and out of the conversation as well, because that's very important. And being an ally is, right, it's not just like posting a tweet, right, or taking a picture because you went to a protest one day. It's that continued work when no one's watching and being like very strong in your approach to being an ally.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, TK. Thank you all so much for joining us in this panel discussion. And okay, sorry, it was a little glitch. Thank you so much to the panelists. Can you, let's everyone kind of, if you can unmute yourselves, give our panelists a round of applause.
Aw, so sick.
The dogs are going crazy. Amazing.
You all for coming and being a part of the conversation. This is really, really, really important work that we're doing, and we're not just talking just to talk. You're saving lives, literally saving lives by speaking out. The more you talk, the more people will listen. And I think it's just really important work. And thank you, Tatiana, for just putting this whole thing together, because this is a great platform and you are doing such great work. I love what you did at the banks with those girls. And anyone who wanted to go, I thought that was so sick. And I, like some people, don't have the opportunity to go out protesting because I have to make sure I'm keeping myself safe for my residents. So this is just a great way to speak out, and I love it.
Thank you so much. And I knew that there was a glitch, and TK, I'm sorry that I cut you off, or there was a glitch. Can you just repeat that last, if you remember, and if everyone can mute themselves again, please. TK, there was a little snippet that we missed, the last part.
I don't know. What was the last thing that you heard?
Sorry. Well, how can people, like, I didn't, because I didn't hear it, but
I think it was about like family members and like being
Yeah, making sure you're standing strong in your
yeah, and
stance
not
when it
backing
comes
down
to
with
combative.
people,
Yeah, combative relatives.
Right.
and
So
not
just
just being one but the whole.
so
Yeah.
being open, right, and being, proud and strong with your family members, right, and like encouraging them to like work on those biases, right, and those stereotypes and those microaggressions as well, and like not just being an ally when it's convenient and you can be seen, but when no one's watching either, because that's when it's most important, is when no one's watching. And it's not just about sharing things or attending, right, a protest to post on social media. If you're doing it for clout, don't do it at all. If you're going to be an ally, be a real true blue ally and do what it is that you're supposed to be doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, TK. And I just want to, since I recently watched Becoming, which is Michelle Obama's documentary on Netflix. If you haven't watched that yet, please go on to Netflix and watch Becoming, Michelle Obama's documentary. And I just want to end it with what she ended her documentary with, if you guys don't mind, is it says, "We the people are surrounded by each other of all different backgrounds, and we are all thinking, I'm not alone in this." Like, so all of us right now being on this panel right now in this time, and even also listening to the replay. So I'm not alone in this. I like this feeling of not being divided. So if we can open up a little bit more to each other and share our stories, our real stories, that's what breaks down barriers. But in order to do that, you have to believe that your story has value. Dare to be vulnerable. We are at a crossroads of where we have to think about, who are we as a nation? I too remain hopeful that people want better, if not for themselves, then for the next generation. Michelle Obama. And this is it. This is it. This is not going back. It's moving forward. It's educating yourself, not other people educating you, but you doing the work for yourself. And I'm getting your shit together so we can all unite as one nation. So thank you once again for all the panelists. This discussion is not over. We're going to have multiple community panel discussions every month. Okay, so please stay tuned to nwralbany.org, on our Facebook page, on our Instagram. We're going to have more because, right, panelists, we didn't even touch on a lot of the questions that I sent to you.
There was so much more to be talked
So
about.
much. We could do this forever, literally our whole lives.
Yeah.
But we are not done. And thank you all so much for attending. I love you all.
Thank you,
Love
Tatiana.
you.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
Thank
You're doing such great work in the community.
Nothing
you
but
really
up,
are.
everyone. I love you guys. Stay
Love you all.
safe, stay grounded. And if anyone needs any information, please go onto the website. I have all of our panelist bios on there, and the Venmos for them are all in the chat right now. So if you haven't, scroll up and you will find that.